Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about how Indian Americans live and what their political attitudes and views are. This is part two of the review that I've been doing of the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace survey that they had conducted in the past few months. They published their survey in three parts. The first part essentially dealt with how Indian Americans would vote in the presidential elections of November 2024. And then they have been trying to capture, I think, in that same survey, some of the attitudes and political views of Indian Americans. So in part one, I shared basically a lot of stuff about their identity, who are Indian Americans. And in part two today, I will talk basically about their political preferences. Are they Democrats? Are they Republicans? Do they like Modi? Do they like Rahul Gandhi? Do they support BJP or do they support Congress, or how many support BJP and how many support Congress? This is a profile. I've read some of the comments both on my India channel as well as my global channel, which is now blocked in India. Given that India is the mother of democracy, they love to block YouTube channels. So what I will be doing is quickly summarize what I did in the part one for those of you who haven't watched it. But I do want to let you know that this is not a survey that I did. Okay, this is not my views. This is a survey conducted by the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace. And the people who did this survey and published these reports are Sumitra Badrinathan, Devesh Kapoor, who's a very famous professor at Johns Hopkins, at least I know him, and his work, Annabelle Richter and Milan Vaishnav, who is the director, I think, of Indian studies at the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace. Uh, so anyway, in the part one, we learned that there are about 5.2 million Indians who live in America, or people who identify themselves in some way in connection with India, about 52 lakhs. And 55% of them identify as Hindus, 14% as Muslims, 8% as Christians, and 3% as Sikhs. We also learned that 80% of Indian Americans basically fear that white nationalism in the United States is a threat to the rights of minorities, and 69% of Indian Americans also felt that the rise of Hindu nationalism in India was a threat to the rights of minorities. So now let's go ahead and see what this report reveals to us about the values of Indian Americans, who are now the second largest immigrants to the US from a single country after Mexican Americans. So they asked them the question about party identification, and they asked them in line, basically, generally speaking, do you think of yourself as a Democrat or as a Republican or as an independent? And this is the answer that we got. 47% of Indian Americans can identify as Democrats. And so Indian Americans are overwhelmingly Democrats. And 26% are independent, and only 21% identified themselves as Republicans. So this question was probably asked around October of 2024. I'm willing to bet that people who support Republicans now probably has gone down after the way in which undocumented Indian immigrants were treated, and also the racism that people like Vivek Ramaswamy, Usha Vance, and Zohran Mamdani are experiencing, especially from the right. So, so the first thing to clear that nearly half of Democrats are, uh, half of Indian Americans are Democrats, and one fourth of them are independent, which means that they will vote either Democrat or Republican based on either issues or candidates, and 20% or 21% are Republican. Now, this is an interesting question. I like it because I teach political ideologies practically now every year, once every year, and this particular data will be very useful and interesting to my students. So they were asked, where would you place yourself on this scale from extremely liberal to extremely conservative? So 15% of Indian Americans said they are extremely liberal, 31% said they are liberal, and 9% said they are slightly liberal. So if you add them all up, 55% Indian Americans identify as liberals. 26% identify themselves as moderates. And I'm stunned by how consistent this is because if you notice, when they are asked which part, how do you think of yourself, Democrat, Republican, or independent, 26% said they think of themselves as independent, and 26% also identified themselves ideologically as moderates. That means they have some conservative predilections and they have some uh, liberal predilections. American Muslims who have studied more tend to be like that. So they are socially conservative and economically liberal. Uh, and then when they were asked, are you conservative? Only 4% said slightly conservative, 11% said conservative, and only 3% said extremely conservative. So this is very interesting about only 11 plus 7. 18% say they are conservative, and 55% say they are liberal. The rest are moderate. So basically, Indian Americans tend to be lean more about on the liberal side. So I'm not worried about the Indian American vote for Zohran Mamdani in New York. I think they are going to vote heavily for him. Uh, when they were asked about presidential choices in the November 2024 elections, this question was posed only to the citizens, obviously. And this is what they said. 60% of Indian Americans said they're voting for Kamala Harris. 31% said Donald Trump. It's 2:1. It's unbelievable. I thought it would have been higher for Donald Trump. And 5% said other and do not intend to vote, 4%. So it's interesting. I wonder who these 5% people voted for. And then presidential vote choice, when you compare that to 2020, apparently 68% said Biden and Harris in 2020, and then for Kamala Harris, only 60. So Kamala lost a lot of Indian American votes. And Donald Trump gained that. He went from 2022 to 31. I guess they saw everything that Donald Trump did, uh, or maybe they saw everything that Joe Biden did and moved away and voted for Donald Trump. But anyway, you can see a pretty steep spike in support for Donald Trump in 2024 as compared to 2020. And there's also a spike in support for others. But fewer people have chosen to stay out of the political contest, and I'm happy about that. When they were asked this question about presidential handling of US-India relations, basically, which president did a better job managing US-India relations? So Indian Americans had the opportunity of watching Donald Trump in his first term as president, and they watched Biden too. So when they were asked, 34% said Joe Biden, and 28% said Donald Trump, 26 says both were the same, and 12%, I guess, don't know. I'm very surprised that I think that if you were to ask this question now, it would be very interesting. Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I think both would get much lower rating now than rather than both were the same. You'll probably get a lot more people saying don't know, because I don't think Joe Biden will get 1/3 of the vote saying he is handling India well. Uh, or maybe it might go up because people realize that Biden treated India much better than Donald Trump is treating India in the second term. Partisan preferences on US India relations. Which party does a better job managing US India relations? The Democratic Party. I guess this is 41%. So there are at least 6% Indian Americans who are Democrats, but they don't think their party treats it well. So basically, you could say that that political views of Indian Americans as far as U.S. politics is concerned leans to the left. They are more democratic. They prefer democratic presidents, and they feel that Democrats are better for India than Republicans. Uh, Now, this is an interesting question, and I saw this question. I was saying, whoa, I was surprised, and that was my reaction. So, they asked the Indian Americans views on targeted assassinations in the United States. Uh, this is a euphemistic term. The term that the US government uses is called as transnational repression. This is the activity for which Iran was labeled as a terrorist sponsor of terrorism, state sponsor of terrorism, because it was killing Iranian dissidents in Europe and the US. That was one of the reasons why early on Iran was put on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. So, views on targeted assassinations in the United States. Would the Indian government be justified in assassinating a US citizen on US soil? I don't know why they make this distinction. US citizen on US soil. Is it okay to kill Americans in Paris? Would the Indian government be justified in assassinating a US citizen on US soil if it believes this person is promoting a violent separatist movement in India? So this is basically about Gurpatwant Singh Panno case. And 51% of Indian Americans said no. That is very interesting. 51% said no. And 26% said yes. So again, 2:1, Indian Americans lean towards international law. So they do not want India assassinating Americans on American soil based on their perception of what the political activities of that person constitutes. 23% said don't know. I find that a bit surprising. So many people. I can understand that 5 to 10% people haven't followed the issue and therefore can't form an opinion. I suspect that these people didn't want to share their views. So anyway, this is an important information for Indian policymakers that with in a ratio of 2:1, Indian Americans do not like transnational repression or targeted assassinations. And then they were asked the question about opinions on the Israel-Hamas war. Uh, Things have gotten much worse in Gaza of late. And the public opinion, both in the US and worldwide, has changed significantly. So I think that the views that are expressed here may not be as stable as we think, and they may have changed significantly since this survey was conducted. But anyway, let's go by what the survey says at the moment. In the ongoing conflict, would you say your sympathies lie entirely with the Israeli people? There are only 11% Indian Americans who say they are entirely with the Israeli people, mostly with the Israeli people, that's 18%. So about 29% Indians are with Israel, equally with both. So one out of four, roughly 24%, is on both sides. And then you say mostly with the Palestinians are 17%, entirely with Palestinian people, 18%. So 35% of Indian Americans are with the Palestinian people, and 29% are with Israel, and 24% are with both of them. If I can make a safe guess that we know that the 14% of the population in the US of Indian Americans is Muslim, so if you say 35% are supporting Palestinians and most of them are Muslims, then we still have 21% uh, non-Muslim Indian Americans also supporting the Palestinian cause, and there are 13% who say don't know. I'm very surprised the large number of don't knows we are getting. And then here's what you're probably waiting to know. What are the views of Indian Americans about the Indian government? Views on the Indian government's policies. How would you describe your views on the Indian government's policies? So 18% say we strongly support, and then 28% says support somewhat, 18% don't know. So you could say that 46%, 46% Indian Americans strongly support, support, not strongly support, and strongly support. So let's say 46% support the Indian government's policies. By the way, I like this number because this is exactly the number of people who said that they are upper caste Hindus in the US. That doesn't mean that all upper caste Hindus are supporting, but then it's a coincidental that 46% people support the government's policies in India, and 46% of them identified as belonging to upper caste uh, Hinduism. 18% said they don't know, and then you have about 36% saying they are critical of the Indian government. I understand that in the US, Indian Americans, basically Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs are all very critical of this current government. And so if you go and look at most of the major organizations of these communities, you will find that they are critical of the government. And so 14% Muslims, 8% Christians, that's 22, and add 3%. So 25% are the minorities, and there are still non-minority Indian Americans. Uh, so about 11% who are also critical of the Indian government. That would be the Dalits and the backward class. I don't know. Maybe the backward classes support BJP because Narendra Modi himself identifies as an OBC. So, but nevertheless, this is the figure. 46% support the government and 36% are critical of the government of India. So this is interesting that Indian Americans are overwhelmingly to the left. They are liberal. They support Democrats in the US, but they support Modi. So there is an element of hypocrisy here. In countries that they don't live, they want conservative right to rule. And in the countries that they live, they want liberals to govern so that they can enjoy civil rights. This is exactly like the criticism that people make about Muslims, because when Muslims are in minorities, they want secularism and democracy, and when they are in majority, they want to impose Sharia. And I think that is what a lot of Indian Americans are trying to do, that in India, we want conservatives and anti-democratic right-wingers to rule. But wherever we live, we want Democrats and liberals to rule so that our rights here are protected. Party identification in India. Which Indian political party do you identify most with? This was a big surprise to me. 51% said, I don't identify with Indian political parties. And 28% said they support Bharatiya Janata Party, and 20% said Indian National Congress. Let me tell you this much, that the supporters of the Bharatiya Janata Party are far, far more active and more intense than the supporters of Indian National Congress. And you can see this when their leaders, so when Modi visits the United States, you have 50,000 people showing up uh, in a basketball stadium in New York. Whereas when Rahul Gandhi shows up, there isn't this terrible planning and there is not that much enthusiasm as much as we see for Modi. So maybe because of the Modi events, we have overestimated the support that the Bharatiya Janata Party enjoys in the diaspora, but the data shows that 51% do not identify with any political party, only 28% support the BJP, and only 20%. So little more than one out of four supports BJP, and one out of five supports the Congress. And I guess there's others, 1% maybe, they are the people who support Majlis. This should be also something that should worry uh, Muslim parties. There are 14% Muslims, but there is no support for any Muslim-leaning party such as Majlis from Telangana, or well, there are no other Muslim parties anyway. And finally, here is the approval ratings of the leaders. Approval of Prime Minister Modi in 2020 and 2024. So this is a comparison. What was the views of Indian Americans towards Modi in 2020 and 2024? So nothing has changed, just 1% more approval. So 35 to 36% strongly approve Prime Minister Modi. 15% used to approve him strong, and now it's just 11%. So you could say that Narendra Modi enjoyed an approval rating of 52%, no, 50% in 2020, and now it is 47%. Uh, Disapproval, if you see, disapprove is 9 and 11, disapproval is going up 22 to 23. So you can say that from 31 to 34%. So in 2020, 31% Indian Americans disapproved of Modi, and now it's 34%. And then 1 out of 5 Indian Americans says they don't know. I guess a lot of Indian Americans are, I guess, not interested in politics that much, or they stay out of both the U.S. politics as well as the uh, Indian politics. We do in the previous survey. I did not uh, talk about it, but one of the findings was that uh, American-born Indians, so those who were born in the US, they are more engaged in politics as well as in volunteering and social activities here in the US than their parents, those who are immigrants. One of the reasons could be that immigrants don't feel as secure, plus they have just spent like 10, 15 years going from being a student or coming here for H-1B and transitioning through green card to citizenship, that they must be saying, okay, let me take some breath and enjoy being an American before I start getting involved in the politics. Uh, and they use something called mean feeling thermometer ratings. So basically, they just, it's like like, do you have very strong feelings towards something? So this is just a measure of how do you feel about something. It's not a question of approval or disapproval, but what's your reaction? How do you feel about it? So they did this both in 2020 and 2024. And so they ask, how do you feel about Modi? So now this is how the thermometer goes. If the rating is above 50, that means the respondent likes. So if you ask them, how do you feel about biryani? And if the answer is 60, then it's, oh, they love biryani or they like biryani. But if you ask them the question, what do you think about rasgullas? And if the answer is 40 or 45 or 49, then you feel that, okay, they don't like it. And if they say 50%, which means they are neutral. So anything below 50 is you don't like, anything above 50 is you like. So the mean feeling question was asked about how they feel about Modi. In 2020, it was 55%, and now it's 52%. So you can say safely that even though there is less liking, but still there is liking for Modi among Indian Americans. In BJP, now that has dropped. BJP's rating for liking was the same as Modi's in 2020, but now it's more on the dislike side. So Indian Americans generally dislike BJP, but they still like Modi. Uh, that's interesting. When they asked about the Congress Party, uh, it is 46% in 2020 and 48% now. So the dislike for the Congress Party is nearly identical to the dislike for the BJP. But BJP is on the downhill and Congress is on the rise. The difference is marginal. BJP went from 55 to 49 and Congress went from 46 to 48. Uh, about Rahul Gandhi has gained a lot, 5% growth, but it's still on the dislike side. So you can say that Indian Americans don't like Rahul Gandhi. Unless that number goes above 50, it has to be at least 51, so that then we can say that Indian Americans like Rahul Gandhi. So now it's safe to say that they don't like Rahul Gandhi, but they didn't like him more in 2020, and uh, they don't like him less now. Anyway, with RSS, they didn't like it before, and they don't like it even more now. So it's interesting. I mean, obviously the the people who designed this survey are quite focused on Indian politics. So let me summarize the political views of Indian Americans for you. Very similar. They like Modi. They don't like BJP. They don't like RSS. They don't like Rahul Gandhi. They don't like the Congress Party. They are liberals, they are Democrats, but they're also hypocritical. In America, they want liberal and Democrats to rule. They support Biden and Kamala Harris way more than they supported Donald Trump in 2020 or 2024. But the hypocrisy is that they support left wing governments where they live, and they support right wing governments which they recognize is a threat to the rights of minorities. Remember, 69% of Indian Americans think that Hindu majoritarianism is a threat to the rights of minorities, yet they support that in India with approval ratings of positive ratings towards Modi. But in America, they don't like that. I hope you enjoyed this survey. Remember, I didn't come up with the answers. These are answers that the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace got from 1,206 Indians that they surveyed. 1,206 is the sample size with a margin of error of 3%. So thank you for watching Khanversations. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. And until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.